Hey, fuckers. I wanted to pop in today and answer a question that I received a while ago and needed to think about. It's also a question that we have tackled before in the community. So if you're a subscriber, you might want to check out an episode from the end of 2022, which was addressing the problem of toxic shame. Now, today, our question was a basic: how do I overcome the shame around my traumatic events? And I considered it and decided my best answer is a lean into it approach. That might not be for everyone, but it's what works best for me. And I'll tell you why. So, what doesn't work is the just be nice to yourself approach. Number one, we know we're beating ourselves up. We say, just stop it already. We hope that this allows us to let it go. And then instead, step number four, we beat ourselves up for not being able to stop beating ourselves up. At which point we return to step one and tell ourselves to just stop it already, right? It's not fruitful. So, what to realize about shame versus the idea of letting it go is shame is a social safety device. Shame is an indicator of some sort of deep biological fear that we're going to be socially judged, rejected, exiled, and therefore it's a survival threat. We did something that is now dooming us. So the reason that we can't just let it go or just be nice to ourselves is the belief that we deserve this treatment. The shame is due because rightful punishment and danger is imminent. So the subconscious narrative around the shame may be something like, I fucked up and I deserve what is coming to me. I'm regretful. I'm afraid of what's coming. I'm afraid of what my action means about myself. Holy shit, I'm afraid of myself. Or I can't just move on from this. I'm stuck with these consequences and the asshole who caused them. That's me. So, mentally letting yourself off the hook doesn't override the subconscious fear response, is what I'm trying to say. It's like you're being chased by a tiger. You tell yourself, just let it go. Don't be afraid anymore. Does it work? No, of course not. Your system still knows that you are in danger and or believes that you are even after that tiger is gone. So, therefore, in my view, we need to approach this shame problem from the place of fear and then layer in the rational thought rather than trying to use rational thought to eliminate the fear that's coursing through your subconscious, your reptilian brain, and your body. So, in other words, I do hope you're watching this video. If not, you might want to check it out for all my graphics this time. It looks like this. You can be consciously, quote, overcoming your shame and fear through rationality, but that requires continual conscious effort and attention from your prefrontal cortex. And meanwhile, your unconscious processes are continually telling you the exact opposite. And that's happening without requiring your conscious effort or attention. So, what do you think is going to happen? Here's the answer. Eventually, the conscious prefrontal cortex approach is going to peter out, or you will get distracted at some point. Meanwhile, your unconscious fear processes can rage on indefinitely, and they are the energetic priority because they keep you alive. So that process is going to win when the prefrontal cortex approach falters. Here's another visualization. Here's the prefrontal cortex to the rescue whenever you have the spoons for it and don't take your eye off the prize. Toss a little Dixie cup of water onto this flaming, nightmarish hell that is living in your subconscious lizard brain and body, which is burning eternally bright. All of that being said, let's talk about hijacking and disbanding this survival based process where your fears and shame are coming from. Huh? Here come a few more additional graphics, and then I'll tell you my real answer: how to overcome shame. So, let's say you have a traumatic event, which is like the nucleus of your issue that you're dealing with. All around that traumatic event nucleus is this pit of shame and fear and judgment that forms around it and fills the deep crevasse, which is sunken down and supported by your core wounds, your fucked up core beliefs, and your worst fears. In other words, your subconscious is what holds this deep pit, and the deep pit is filled with your shame, fear, judgment, and then somewhere in the middle of that is your actual traumatic event. On top of all of that, floating in the clouds above is your conscious brain. It doesn't have that much to do with any of the things that I just described. And in fact, if we were looking down into this traumatic event pit from the top, from your consciousness, what you would see is this traumatic event, but all around it, these confusing points and concentric networks that intertwine with each other, which again are composed of fear, shame, and self judgment. They're radiating off of the traumatic event, but to the point that they actually become one with the traumatic event. We can't really look at the trauma without also experiencing the fear, shame, and judgment. And at a certain point, we're not sure what is tormenting us more. It's one big confusing conglomerate. Meanwhile, this is sunken into the dark pit of your subconscious where you can't really see what's happening, but it's not necessarily the friendliest place. All of this being said, yeah, it's hard to even make out what is happening here, to make sense of it, to let any of it go, right? So, if you're to take a top down approach, it's really like this shame free fall into a terror pit. And if you begin to approach diving into that deep crevasse, your brain is going to say, nope, no fucking way. Your brain does not want to go in there because it does not know what it's getting into or where the end of this pit lies or how to crawl its way back out again. So you don't really even break the surface of the pit before most of us go off distracting ourselves in one way or another. Instead of bothering with that top down approach where we try to force our prefrontal cortex to override everything else in our brains and bodies, I recommend, my controversial take, a bottom up, aka hell up approach, which has the potential to minimize your fear and recontextualize your shame, judgment, and trauma by engaging your core wounds, your fucked up core beliefs, and your worst fears first, then recontextualizing those perspectives, which gives you access into the pit of shame, fear, and judgment so you can release those things. And also, then you have access to the traumatic event nucleus. So hopefully, you can even process and release that. So I recommend do not approach your shame/trauma from the sunny side, the top side of your consciousness. Instead, lean into your subconscious, your worst fears and self judgments around the trauma. Break through that shame/fear crust from the bottom up, and then critically reason through those fears from the top down using what I call the so what method. Here's a little schematic of that. We start with the core wounds, fucked up core beliefs, and worst fears. We ask, so what? And that becomes the basis of our recontextualization process. That leads to the release of all of these horrible things that we're carrying. So here's how it works. And this is going to seem complicated at first, but realize that it's just a repetitive process as we break this down. First of all, in the so what method, you ask, what are your worst known fears surrounding this traumatic event? AKA, what would this really mean about you? What do you fear that it indicates about you, your worth, your future? Then you ask yourself, are those fears real? But let's be honest, we don't know. That's why we're still carrying them. So, to lean into this, let's assume that they are. Then imagining their reality, really feeling it and imagining what would come next. What are you fearing is the next likely outcome? You ask yourself, okay, so all of that happens. So what? What would these fears and judgments mean if they are true? If your worst expectations materialize, then what's next? Feel the discomfort, breathe, and then honestly search inside yourself to answer the question. In doing so, you're going to name the realer fears that lie below your first level of known conscious fears. And then we begin again. Are they real? Let's be honest, we don't fucking know. So then, imagining their reality, you ask yourself once more, so what? What would these fears and judgments mean if true? If these outcomes that you're expecting materialized? Really explore the answer. Imagine it. This is going to take time. Give yourself plenty of time and space to go through this. Feel into the discomfort, breathe, and then answer that question. In doing so, you'll name the even realer fears that lie below your realer fears that lie below your conscious known fears. What are they? You see where we're going? Just repeat this process. Keep going until you reach the end of your fears, which I'm just saying should be registering in your body. You will actually feel these fears and the emotions of the expected outcomes. That is the point. So repeat this until you hit the bottom, and you'll know that you've actually reached the bottom of your fears when you ask, so what? And you run out of emotional and mental answers. Nothing is really stirring in you. You kind of feel as though this nightmare has reached a completion where you're not sure how it could get worse. Alternatively, you might ask the question, is that real? And find that instead of saying, I don't know, you openly are laughing at yourself and saying, no, bitch, no, that's not real. This has gotten silly now. And at that point, then I prompt you to critically think and answer the following questions. So, if this suddenly seems rather silly to me, is any of this concentric fear real at all? AKA, ask yourself, what would your worst fears and self judgments really, in reality, mean about your worth, your life, and your future? I know this all sounds a bit confusing, so here's an example and a reminder. You can check out these graphics anytime you need them for reference. Here's my example. I'm afraid this event means that I'm a bad person. Is that real? I don't know. So let's fuck around with it. Let's lean into it. Let's say yes. Okay. So what? So what if I'm a quote, bad person? It's already sounding silly, isn't it? Does that mean, here's your realer fear, I don't deserve love? Interesting. Didn't expect that to come up. Is that real? I don't deserve love if I'm a bad person. If I'm a bad person because of this traumatic event. I don't know. Again, we're doing a thought experiment. So let's just say yes and imagine it. Okay, so I accept. It means I don't deserve love. Well, what would that mean? Answer. Nothing new, lol. The realer fear is revealed. I actually already feel that way. Huh. Interesting again. So you feel as though maybe you already are a bad person and you don't deserve love. And that's why you feel unloved at this point. And is any of that real? I'm not sure. Once more, let's say yes. Imagine it, feel it. Okay, well, I guess this is what it's like to not be loved. So, what does this indicate? What does all of that mean about me and my worth and my future? I'll be all alone forever. Huh. Interesting. Again, is that real? Does that thought stack up against reality? Huh. Probably not. It's sounding rather absolutist and emo, isn't it? Anything else that you're fearing below that? Pause, feel, and listen inside. No, not really. I guess it's pretty much the fear of being alone and unloved forever. Okay, so that's the worst it can possibly get. Yeah, it's pretty bad. Really though, self, does it seem likely or like a fitting punishment trickling down from this original traumatic event in question? No. If someone else had this trauma, would you agree that this was their fate, that this is what they deserved? No, never. And so does it sound rather extreme and kind of dumb now? Yes. So, therefore, is any of this real? I'm not super sure. It is feeling pretty flimsy now. So, what would the reality of your worst fear really mean about you? Huh. Well, okay. So, maybe I did do something that I regret, but even if I had any part of it, which is questionable, even if I royally fucked it up, it would be rather dramatic and emo to believe that I can't ever fix things or have relationships or have love in my life. Honestly, now these just seem to be some fearful trauma illusions slash fucked up core beliefs slash maybe some introjected abuse narratives. And actually, they're kind of funny if I take several steps back. Right. So, do you still feel like this traumatic event or the shame around it holds the same power over you? Hopefully not. Hopefully, you went through something like this. You begin asking hard questions, and your discomfort is going to rise to extreme levels. It's going to peak, and you're going to have to breathe through it and remember that this is a thought experiment that you're running. As you're doing this, asking these hard questions and feeling this discomfort rise, it's because your awareness is dipping down into your subconsciousness. The hard questions are bringing you deeply into places that you don't normally let yourself go. But as you start finding unrealistic answers to those hard questions, you'll find that your consciousness returns. You start coming back out of your sub C, and your prefrontal cortex starts saying, "This is a little bit much, isn't it?" At which point your discomfort will come back down and down and down past the point where it originally started, which was probably subconsciously rather uncomfortable. Now it can actually dip to the 0% mark, even in your sub C, and you can find real relief as you return to your full conscious state. Again, I recommend checking out my graphic if you're not watching the video currently. So, overall, the process works like this. These assumed ramifications of your trauma are as bad as they can possibly get. If not, just keep going. Keep exploring your fears and sit with them. Feel them in you and explore your brain for answers about what do they really mean. In doing so, you find the deeper fears that your conscious ones normally mask. And then you keep digging deeper than that, even. Pretend that the worst of your fears is true, reminding yourself this is just a thought experiment. And if you need to, pretend that someone else is living through your feared experience and assess them from the outside. Suddenly, it doesn't actually sound very true at all, does it? These fears seem a bit harsh and extreme, unlikely and off base, huh? All right, but even if it was true, does it really matter the way that you've been subconsciously fearing that it does? If this was somebody else who you were assessing, would you say the same things to them that you've been saying to you in these quiet subconscious whispers? No. And you'll probably realize it also isn't true. It doesn't stack up against critical thinking. Fantastic. So then, how do you feel about reapproaching this issue again, knowing that it doesn't really matter, even if your most shameful and most powerful fears were correct? Probably like it's not accurate or necessary to fear or judge this event nearly as much as you apparently always have been, right? Hopefully, the answer is yes. You have a bit of a laugh at your back asswardsly logical brain and the many fears it has created for you. And then there's not really this pit inside of you anymore. Your core wounds and fucked up core beliefs and worst fears have been re examined, reality checked. In a big way, you've lived through them by going through this bottom up emotional experience. And then you found that you could actually loll at them, which allows you to recontextualize your perspective around the entire trauma pit, which allows you access to your shame and fear and judgment so you can release those things. And this also allows you access to the traumatic event nucleus itself, those horrible memories that have been clouded and hidden behind the shame and fear and judgment. And those can be released as well. You find conscious relief, and you find, even more powerfully, your subconscious relief. What has been driving your real misery all of this time is finally let go. And that is my recommendation on how you overcome shame in an actually effective way. Start at the bottom, your personal hell. Identify your unrealistic subconscious fears, which you'll only do so by digging deeper and deeper until you find out the base of them and how probably ridiculous it really is. And then you work your way to realistic assessment with the prefrontal cortex finally playing a role in the whole thing. So you mesh your secret fears, your deep emotions, and critical thoughts so that real relief and a closed system healing process from the bottom up and top down is available to you. But remember, be careful. When in doubt, consult with your therapist. Don't just do this if you have doubts about being able to do this thought experiment without throwing yourself into that misery pit and being trapped there. And if you need more help understanding these many brain processes, you might want to check out t-mfrs.com or the full Patreon library for a lot more help with this question and community support when you need someone to remind you, this is kind of an off base fear that you're basing all of your self judgments and shame uponst. And that's it, fuckers. I hope this was helpful. If you have more questions, you know where to send them, preferably my inbox on Patreon. Hail yourself, hail Archie. And until we talk again, cheers, y'all. Speak to you soon. Bye.